organization. So welcome to the Training and Simulation Industry Symposium 2020, virtual style. Usually we're in Orlando with about 800 folks, and we have collected about 700 folks of the tribe here on the virtual network. So that's it's a loyal, small, but really energetic and great audience. They're looking forward to your insights, especially from a training perspective. I know you did some training system kind of work in the Air Force, but they live training systems there. They live a lot of the high tech stuff that's going into training systems, the IT backbones and things like that. So they're looking for ways that you think we're moving forward in the future. The community is, again, very high energy, forward looking, and it turns quickly. So it's not like a 7-8 year thing. These are the 18-month folks. So they look forward to seeing how you're addressing those kind of problems. So now I know you need no intro, so I'm going to give you no intro, but I turn it over to you for your opening remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks for everybody out there. Sorry we can't be in Orlando together. As many of you know, spent a lot of time in Tampa. My son lived in Orlando for a long time, so and worked with everybody there at NOC TSD and the whole PO Stride community industry partnership out there. You guys are really an impressive group, and when I think of kind of best practice of government industry joint activity all working together is you guys certainly come to the top. It's part of the reason we put one of our tech bridges down there, and we'll certainly have an opportunity to talk about that. Hey, I'm just going to spend maybe a couple of minutes framing how I see things, both I would say a kind of larger picture, and then dive down into Navy with a kind of eye on training systems, but leave lots of time for our Q&A. And so I will try not to take all the time up here, maybe just 5-10 minutes. So spoiler alert, if you've got questions, get ready with them, because I think that's the most fruitful part of getting everybody together here. And again, appreciate everybody kind of doing this remotely. Hey, it's been an interesting time in the Navy, I think, for all of us. We've been really working hard as a partner, particularly with those in industry, small and large, to be that good business partner and work together on how to work through this COVID disruption. And quite frankly, I think that's probably the first disruption of many disruptions coming forward. So the way I'm thinking about this is really, how do we take advantage of what we're learning and accelerate in this disruption phase to move us even more quickly than we were going to where we need to be. And this last couple of months have shown us where a lot of those opportunities were. I think some we probably knew about, but didn't work our way into as quickly as we could have. So on our end, we've been really working hard to stabilize the industrial base. And that's whether it's kind of a larger contract, a medium contract, or a lot of the small entrepreneurial business folks that are here on the line working kind of early phase S&T and research activities. As a Navy, interestingly enough, we're about 37% ahead on our contract awards. And so, after we've kind of made sure we were keeping everybody healthy, which is kind of job one, whether that's, out there in industry or in our own spaces, we really focused our effort on stabilizing and making sure the industrial base was healthy and could weather this and actually accelerate through it. And so to date, we're about, for this year, about 37% ahead on our contract awards, well in excess of $100 billion already compared to, on the order of $75 billion this time last year. Interestingly, about $50 billion 2 years ago. So essentially doubling output from 2 years ago, and actually doing with a lot less contract actions. And so what I really want to make sure is we had our work lined up. All that work was out there. And then if you're out there in industry, as you're working through your unique challenges, one of those challenges wasn't waiting on the Navy work to be there, and then cause this issue where you couldn't afford to wait for us to do business as usual. And so, really happy, proud of the team doing that, both on the industry side and on the government side. Likewise, we've gone through all of our small performers on the research side, understanding what everybody's needs are, helping facilitate loans if need be, looking at acceleration where we could of SIBR contracts, any of our other contracts to, again, place us in a condition of stability wherever possible, which would allow us to move forward. Our goal now is to leverage that efficiency and new ways of doing business that we've discovered and are improving to accelerate us to getting to the place where we need to be, which is operating more efficiently and with more resilience, because I do want to make sure we don't trade one kind of brittle system for another brittle optimized system, and really build resilience in there. Doing a lot of work on supply chain and understanding our supply chain at the strategic level and at the tactical level, and then making choices on how to improve our resilience in the supply chain. By doing all that, then we enable accomplishment of the mission. And here in particular, I'm already seeing a lot of good stuff out of this community, and where I see additional opportunity. Over time, we perhaps were not, our ships and our deployed assets were perhaps not as self-sufficient as they needed to be. We did a lot of in-person training. We did a lot of, if there was maintenance or tech support needed, we'd fly people all over the world and have field service techs and whatnot. And in a crisis, you can't, particularly this crisis, that was not a avenue that we could use in the same manner. And so we've had to rapidly pivot, and again, I think in a positive sense, to leveraging the technologies, the things you guys have been putting in our hands to be able to do more rapid teletraining, more rapid maintenance support. Being able to get a tech on a VTC and help debug something remotely with different tools. And so I think as I look to the future, we've got to build a future where we have got agility in the way we train. Yes, there's some things we need to do and can do more efficiently, kind of home base, but add more tools to be able to constantly be training in a widely distributed fashion. We've got to leverage some of the new, artificial intelligence, some of these other tools to simplify how to train and use and maintain these very complex systems. And so that the ships or aircraft or any other piece of inventory can be more self-sufficient at the point of use. And while they need to have, access to all of us back here, CONUS, they don't need to rely on that to continue to do standard operations. I think there's a great opportunity there. And then I think finally, what we've got to continue to do is build the business architectures, the technical architectures, the programmatic architectures that allows us to bring in new ideas more quickly and get them all the way from discovery all the way into deployment into the field. We tend to sometimes on the government side get a little enamored in the discovery phase and want to hold contests and prize challenges and lots of different things, but don't deliver those all the way to the end user in the field in an expedient fashion. And even when we do, we probably don't deliver them with the full training apparatus that goes along with this. So as we aim to be much more dynamic, get our iteration speed up, iteration costs down, to be able to rapidly insert capabilities in the field, we need to have the training systems that are equally as agile, and where possible, get away from purpose-built, very complex capital investments in large training systems, and get much more nimble in our ability to deliver training in lots of different forms, factors, and features. My time at Special Operations Command, we would field some, and many of you guys helped me out there. Thank you for that. Over time, we had, full up trainers on the aviation side, all the way to desktop trainers and procedure trainers that were fairly simplistic. We could port to any device. I think we've got to continue to kind of have that mindset where we can be agile and not have to make everything a custom built, long life cycle kinds of situations. So that requires us working together on the right business approach to do that. That it requires us to have the right technical architectures to enable that, right? And then it allows us, and then we need to have the right training approach that allows us to be as dynamic in training as we want to be in operations. Part of what we're trying to do in the Tech Bridge area is leverage the great talent and enterprise down there to make that more available to the rest of the Navy more easily. And so, between our Naval X activities and the kind of Tech Bridge hub there, close down that distance between operator who's got a problem or an idea, small company, big company, any individual who's got an idea or a product, and then the folks that can put those into being through an acquisition or a technical process. And so that way we can operate kind of at network speed, not at kind of a person by person speed. You guys figured out that in Orlando within your kind of groups and ecosystems down there. I want to tap into it, don't want to replicate it. Now we've got to take that same mindset and be able to operate at the network speed with all the attributes that you guys have shown me over the years of having industry and academia and government folks there and operators all kind of in the big mosh pit. I want to take that same approach now and scale it across the Department of the Navy and make sure that we can leverage everything we've got down there and then give you likewise access to other areas of the Navy who either have problems or solutions that we can put together to create the effects we want for our users. So with that kind of as a maybe a baseline intro, Jim, I'd be happy to take questions or focus on any other topics you want me to focus on. Over.
Okay, thanks for that. I appreciate that. I do have some questions from the crowd as well as some that were sent in last night. So in general, there is there's a COVID effects kind of, there's all that kind of stuff. So if you could comment on how you see the COVID crisis affecting the production, it's like shipbuilding. Are we slowing down, actually creating capability, as well as any other kind of COVID hot points that you've got?
Yeah, I mean, COVID's really interesting. I mean, I've, again, spent a lot of time Special Operations Command, post 9/11, Air Force, Desert Storm time. What's interesting in COVID is it's such a widespread impact and it's hitting folks differently, temporally, in different scales and at different times. There's a pretty amazing story of, and we got to be a little careful, the Defense Industrial Base is not a victim of some of its success because, in the shipyards, we never closed any of our private or public shipyards during the entire COVID process. 100,000 plus shipyard workers. We probably had, maybe 200 cases, maybe a little more than that. And so we've been able to quickly pivot and keep the shipyards open and keep production going. That doesn't mean there haven't been impacts, both in terms of the number of the workforce we can get there and then the productivity of the workforce. And so what we're doing right now is, looking at opportunities to take what we've learned in COVID, use that to accelerate, bring efficiency up, and then kind of get our workforce back. You probably saw the Navy just activated the largest, I think, reservist activation since 9/11 to help us in the shipyard. We've got a reserve program there. What I would say across the industrial base is everybody else has worked very hard in their unique situations. The challenging part is there's a bunch of unique situations, and we did a lot of work previous to this for the last couple of years, kind of on wartime planning. I had a team working on that to kind of understand the supply chain, where we had risk, where we were resilient, and maybe where we weren't. That's helped us from a mindset standpoint. But what it has told me is we really got to continue to focus on that entire supply chain and understand where there are, friction points, opportunities to increase some resilience and whatnot. The biggest issue we've got working, I think, right now, kind of post initial COVID, is working with Congress and everybody else on the CARES Act. There's some, there's language in the CARES Act about funding some of the impacts of COVID, subject to appropriation. To date, there's been no appropriation. And so a lot of our work on the kind of Navy staff here is working with Capitol Hill and with OSD and everybody else to ensure they understand the impacts that are seen across the industrial base, and then understand the opportunities we have to address those. That will be really hard for us to do if there isn't an appropriation to help us, because again, that was all kind of unplanned work. So the good news is work has continued. We've seen some slowdowns here and there. It's not been uniform. Some areas of the enterprise actually have accelerated and are going faster. And so I attribute that, the Navy's close relationship, I think, with industry and the foundation we built of a kind of agility as a core competency and be able to kind of pivot fast, both really served us well as we had to deal with this situation. And I think those would be good attributes for us to continue to focus on as we think of the future, because my sense is we are not out of the disruptions. They may come from different directions and different, whether it's budget or unemployment or another wave of COVID. And so we are working really hard to get in front of that as opposed to be victim of that. Over.
Yeah, thanks for that. I see another kind of common theme in some of the questions regarding OTAs and SIBRs and other methods of accelerating the way we do business. And we have an OTA down in Orlando, the T-Rex OTA. One of the things I thought was very positive about that OTA was the consortium was able to help educate or inform the requirements. So the program managers came outside, saw the art of the possible, went back in, created a better requirement. So do you have any thoughts on OTAs, SIBRs, how we can continue to use them well?
Yeah, I think maybe two thoughts to your kind of more strategic point. If I've learned anything over the years, we get much better solutions by closing down the distance between the end user, the requirements person, the acquisition person, and the provider. And so, particularly at SOCOM, that was a hallmark, and that's something we've really been working hard across the Navy to get away from, transactional processes and get into much more integrated processes. And I think OTAs give us a lot more flexibility in terms of being able to create integrated processes while still respecting all the elements of fair and reasonable and competition and all that. But it allows a much more creative set of opportunities for us to go after. And so I've been, again, you guys are doing a great job down there leading out. A lot of our other warfare centers are really working hard on leading out on how to use OTAs to, I think initially, like any new tool, everybody kind of used it just as it's got a different name, but we'll use it just like the old tool. And so a lot of our initial OTA work in the department were kind of, it was called an OTA, but it looked a heck of a lot like a FAR-based contract. And if you're not careful, you get the worst of both worlds. You lose what's good in a FAR-based contract without getting what's good in an OTA, and you kind of get you go down the wrong path. I've been really impressed with the creativity and really now starting to use OTAs not as just a different tool, but a unique tool that allows us, particularly in this space that you guys are in, really allows us to get that iteration speed up and iteration cost down and close that distance. And so, I continue to see that as an effective tool for everybody. We got to make sure everybody's trained on it. So we don't, use it or don't use it for the, without exploring all the real power in it. And so we're working hard on that. And likewise, if you're out there in industry and you've seen other OTAs with other performers that you think we should know about, again, I am not that smart. I'm a hell of a poacher. I will steal, adapt, learn from anybody. I want that. I think that's a core of a really high performing organization. And so if if you're out there and have other tools that are working well that we should be considering, that's another element of Tech Bridges and NOC TSD down there, is to have the way to communicate that so we can adopt the best practice.
Okay, thanks. That's a great answer. A lot of our community is concerned about the cybersecurity maturity model regulations that are coming up, specifically smalls, or, that it's kind of a daunting when I travel around and listen to their problem sets. The other piece of this, which has come out, is the non-traditionals that we're trying to bring into consortiums. If the CMMC thing is like a death knell, in terms of getting them to come in, another barrier to entry, so as it were. So do you see this? How do you see this? I mean, what do you think we can do going forward?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has the opportunity of becoming a government bureaucracy unto itself. And if we do that, we failed. Likewise, just because you're a small business or just because you're a non-traditional employer doesn't mean you should have some basic cyber hygiene. The same thing you'd want your teenage son or daughter to have on their phone. And so I think the key is balance on our side to make sure we've got the requirements right in terms of the levels, and then try and make sure it doesn't become bureaucratized. It's kind of, to me, if we can make it like an ISO 9000 or something like, we have standards of performance that we should be able to fairly easily work our way through. Having said all that, having worked in a small IT business before I came on active duty, I get it and I appreciate it. So I'm not to say that there's not reason to be concerned about it. What we're trying to do is start this year with a couple of pilots, work where the work is fairly understood. It's a fairly bounded problem, and really kind of test our theory of the case at at small scale to understand and either prove or disprove the myth of the impact. And so that we can be informed as we roll it out, and we don't just roll out this behemoth that is challenging to deal with. But on the other hand, I can tell you, we need to get our collective cyber hygiene together, because we are getting, we're making it easy for our competitors, whether that's industrial competitors or global competitors. And so we've got to get our arms around it. I am wide open to improving how we're doing it and better ideas and experimenting to do there. I would just ask you, if you're out there in industry, as we're doing this, my commitment to you is we'll pilot it and try and do it in a way that doesn't become onerous. That's our goal and intent. As we're doing this, please make the reasonable investment to protect yourself, if for no other reason, you're competitive, your own internal competitive reason. But we can't make it easy on our competitors by having the equivalent of loose lips in this competition. So I know you all are about it. I think if we can get to a reasonable standard of performance tied to the sensitivity of the data, we'll get there. The last piece I'd say is the onus is also on us to identify what's really sensitive data and what isn't. And in the past, the government maybe hasn't done a great job doing that. And so we might overprotect something or underprotect it by not being clear of, in our own minds, what's the critical data to protect. So that's another, I think, key enabler that will make this work well. Over.
Okay, it's a joint concern, I guess, and we'll work our way through it. Much of our new technologies in the training business is centered around AR, VR, MR, XR, that sort of stuff. What do you see the future of this in terms of enabling maintenance and training?
So a little bit, again, I'm using COVID to our advantage from a disruption standpoint. We're in a period where, to me, to get a tech on a ship, it could be a 14-day quarantine period to get to the ship, and 14 days after you get to the ship to do a 1-hour maintenance job or a 10-minute maintenance job on a ship. And maybe in the past, we would have just flown a tech around and said that's worth it. It's completely impractical. So I think what's encouraging to me are twofold. One, we're making our operators more self-sufficient by giving them aids versus doing, and assisting them and training them, and then using technologies to help them. And so where I see us in the future is really leveraging those. Because again, if we're in a fight, we're not going to have the luxury of getting a helicopter and flying a bunch of folks around to ship. And it in your experience. There was we flew a lot of maintainers around. We had them on assets. Where I would like to get to is there may be times when we have to do it, but use these technologies to one, train the crew better as they prepare for their job, use things like AI and machine learning to make the job easier for them so they don't have to, it more automatically debugs the system. And then three, use, these remote technologies to actually, see in their spaces remotely, or, show them on the map. We're also using a lot of these technologies to better map our own systems. So you can, which then has a multiplier effect. If I laser scan an entire ship and I know exactly where everything is, I can much better plan for the maintenance availability and do all the maintenance planning, because I know the actual as is configuration of the system of each ship individually. And so I think this will give us kind of this exponential increase. And what's exciting about it is it's less about the technology per se. It's more about creative employment of the technology, which means that we can do it at speed and scale if we have the right kind of architectures that all of you can bring good ideas to us quickly and we can get them out to the field. Again, I'll harp a little bit on this. It's not just good enough to discover that there's a technology solution. We've got to work it all the way to deployment. And that's really where I'm focused on, making sure we've got a pipeline to get all the way out to because if we can't get deployment, it's really not helping the sailors or Marines yet. Over.
Sir, so on the Naval X program, which I know, is your baby, and there's a lot of questions out there about what is this an idea sort of collection, or is there a acquisition strategy, or is it a money thing, or is it an idea thing? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really, I think that the Navy's got tremendous skill, and there's a lot and tremendous organic talent and a great set of performers. Where we're struggling a little bit though was we were relearning the same thing over and over. And so if there was a discovery at NOC TSD of a new AR technology, if you were at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard repairing something and could use AR technology, the physical distance may be 2,000 miles. The organizational distance between a shipyard worker and NOC, a Puget and NOC TSD could be infinity. And so if you think of Naval X more just as the network, their only job is to connect us together better. And so that we can really operate at network speed. It's not, I was just, kind of SoftWorks was one of my, the ideas at SOCOM. That was a little bit more about discovery and rapid prototyping, laboratory stuff, and bringing different folks together. The Navy has the benefit of warfare centers who have done that really well for a long time. So it's more about how to thicken the lines and connection points. Similarly, if you had an idea as a sailor, you would have no idea how to get it to me. If you were, if you wanted to do, and as we get in this multi-domain operations, the blurred lines between training system and undersea system and aviation system are all getting all blurred. And so what we started to see was everybody was trying to do everything, as opposed to folks being the expert, being able to connect to other experts. So that's really what it's a very small, my measure of their performance is their connection speed. Can they connect the right person to the right person? Tech Bridges kind of opens up that surface area, right? By now getting more nodes on the network, if you think of it from that perspective, with some unique capabilities that then can thicken up the network. That's really where I'm trying to go as we bring this all together. And so as we leverage resources in a particular area, we had, O&R had separate programs for maybe what a PEO was doing, from what the Warfare Center was doing, and there's a lot of redundancy. So the Tech Bridges are really hey, let's, again, I kind of use Orlando as a model. Let's aggregate all of that activity so we get some efficiency and kind of get the 1+1 = 3, not all this kind of independent cylinders of excellence. Over.
Yes, sir. So I think that is a great idea. One of the areas that I have a question on is, does the fleet have a back end input to Naval X? In other words, where does the requirement sort of plug into the good idea?
Yeah, yeah. Again, so it's kind of a connection point. So we put tech bridges at our fleet concentration centers, right, for that very reason. So they can have access, they can dial in. Again, we're kind of using COVID to, the Navy probably wasn't, the most forward leaning in terms of using all of these distributed Zoom, hyper distributed tools. Naval X was doing some of that. So they're helping us kind of create the connective tissue so that if you've got an idea, we can link you, or if you got a problem, that's just one-stop shop. Hey, here's the person we know. We know Ashley's doing this, or Diana's doing this, or you got to talk to Rachel and Crane because they're working on that. Our sailors don't have time to figure that out for themselves. I mean, that's a waste, saying so for the very small footprint, we're helping that. So, it's just a one-stop shop to get in the net, and then we'll see where that goes.
Great. You've pointed out a couple times that Orlando has kind of a unique situation there where we've got really all 4 services working almost on the same campus in the training system area. So how does that apply to the rest of your work? I mean, we're still, what's your ability to go out and work joint solutions?
I think it's, I personally, I think all but one job have been in joint jobs. So, I'm probably uber comfortable in the joint, and kind of my earlier point, right? The faster way to get something is take what somebody else has already done. I think, the Navy has done a fair job of that. I think, quite frankly, the harder challenge in the Navy was more Navy to Navy than in a particular domain area, because again, what had traditionally been largely separate operating domains are now all meshing together. And so our real challenge is looking for the best solution, no matter where it comes from. If it comes from a joint provider, if it comes from small business, big business, I'm just looking for the best solution out there. And so we're trying to drive that culture of what I'll call bold humility. And so, humility in the sense that you don't have to invent something yourself for it to be a good idea. It can just be a good idea that Jim's done or Ashley's done, and I'm going to give Jim full credit. I'm just going to take that idea and use it. But then have boldness in action, and work with a sense of urgency. And so again, NOC TSD and the whole community down there has shown me the value of it. I use it at SOCOM. You guys should all feel very proud for what you've done to support that community, and folks came home that may not have come home had it not been for all the hard work you guys did down there. Similarly on the Navy side. And I think, again, to one of your early questions, I think training is one of these. It's its own domain, but it's in every domain, and it's actually a pretty fast cycle area that teaches us a lot, not only about the technology, what the technology options are, but somewhat of the programmatic ones. I think you're the only you're the only partnership intermediary agreement that all 4 services have signed, if I'm tracking that right. So I'm using you guys as a great lab that we can all learn from, and we should learn equally between all our services. We're long past the time where we can afford everybody to come up with their own unique solution, and that's
Yes,
only going to get more pressurized going forward, in my prediction, with either a flatline budget or potentially a declining budget. We're long past the time where we can afford to everybody do their own thing, and I'm counting on you guys to help keep us honest there and bring those good ideas to the table from all the services, whether it's a product or a process or an approach. I'm all about mission outcomes, and so anything that helps me with a mission outcome is of great interest to me.
Well, we appreciate your time, sir. It's great insights. I think that we collect the training community twice a year, once at TSIS and secondly in December this year in Orlando. We'll hopefully bring 17,000 of us together. So we look forward to maybe you coming down and visiting the crowd and sharing some of your insights. It's got a little bit of everything to include innovation and a whole lot of smart people. So we look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, no,
So
I'd love
thanks.
to come down there.
Yeah,
That'd
I
be
think the
awesome.
invite's on the way, but it's a fun place, and it's full of people who I think you would enjoy.
Yeah,
Very innovative.
many of you out there, I know from a long time. So
Yes,
it'd be
sir.
great to catch up over a cold beverage in Third Square.
All right, sir. Well,
All
thank you
right,
for your time, and we'll let you go.
all right, awesome. Thanks. Have a good rest of your conference.
Yes, sir. And for the rest of the team, at 15:45, 3:45, we'll start a question and answer, and you'll have to go back to the other web platform to do that. So just go ahead and tune out and go over, switch into the webinar, and we'll start at 3:45. Thank you very much.